The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus wiped down the food court tables, his weathered hands moving in practiced circles. 23 years of night shifts had taught him to notice everything: the forgotten purse under table 6, the spilled coffee by the pretzel stand, the small boy sitting alone by the fountain, tears streaming down his cheeks. Marcus had learned that most people walk past pain when it's not their responsibility. But some pains call to you. Some moments demand you stop, kneel down, and ask a simple question. "Hey there, buddy, you okay?" He had no idea that this single act of kindness would change everything, not just for the lost child, but for his own daughter waiting at home, and for a nation watching. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The mall at 9:47 p.m. was a different creature than during the day. Gone were the families with strollers, the teenagers clustering around the GameStop, the elderly couples walking laps for exercise. What remained was the skeleton crew security guards making their rounds, a few die-hard shoppers hitting the late sales, and Marcus Williams pushing his cart through the food court with methodical precision. 23 years. That's how long he'd been working nights at Meridian Mall, watching the ebb and flow of humanity from behind a mop bucket. 23 years of cleaning up after other people's lives, spilled sodas and dropped dreams, forgotten homework and lost love letters. His hands, scarred from years of industrial cleaner and rough work, moved across the orange plastic tables in practiced arcs. The fountain in the center of the food court bubbled quietly. Coins scattered across its bottom like fallen stars. People threw pennies and made wishes, as if copper could carry hope. Marcus had seen it all from this vantage point: marriage proposals and breakups, first dates and final arguments. The mall was a theater, and he was the invisible stagehand. That's when he noticed the boy. Small, maybe 6 or 7, sitting on the edge of the fountain with his legs dangling. His Spider-Man backpack looked too big for his frame, and his sneakers light-up shoes that had lost their magic kicked absently at the air. But it was the way he sat that caught Marcus's attention. Perfectly still except for those restless feet. And the tears, silent tears that caught the fluorescent light as they fell. Marcus had learned, in his years of night work, to read the difference between the kinds of alone. There was chosen, alone, the businessman, eating a late dinner while scrolling his phone, content in his solitude. There was temporary alone, the teenage girl waiting for friends who were just running late. And then there was lost alone. This was lost alone. The boy's mother had told him to wait by the fountain while she used the restroom. That was 47 minutes ago. Marcus knew because he'd been watching, timing his cleaning pattern to circle back every few minutes. The restrooms had been empty for over half an hour. Marcus finished wiping down the table he was working on and straightened, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back. At 51, his body kept score of every long shift, every bent-over hour of work. He glanced around the food court. Taco Bell had closed. So had Sparrow. Only the subway remained open, its 2 bright lights harsh against the darkened storefronts. The boy sniffled. Marcus made a decision that felt both inevitable and enormous. He parked his cart beside the orange Julius and walked over to the fountain, his work boots squeaking softly against the polished floor. "Hey there, buddy." The boy looked up, eyes wide and puffy. Up close, Marcus could see the dinosaur pattern on his t-shirt, the way his hair stuck up in the back like he'd been lying down. A child's face, open and scared. "You okay?" The boy shook his head, then seemed to remember something an adult had taught him about talking to strangers. His mouth closed, and he looked down at his hands. Marcus crouched slowly, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. His knees protested, but he ignored them. At this height, he could see the boy's nameplate, a plastic tag clipped to his backpack that read, "Timmy Chen, Grade 1. "I'm Marcus," he said gently. "I work here. I clean the tables and stuff." He gestured toward his cart with its collection of spray bottles and rags. "Are you waiting for someone?" Timmy nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. The universal gesture of a child who knows something is wrong but doesn't have words for it. "My mom," Timmy whispered. His voice was small, barely audible over the fountain's burble. "She went to the bathroom. She said, 'Stay here and don't move.'" How long ago was that? Timmy's face scrunched up with the effort of calculating time in the way only children do. A really long time. Like, maybe 100 minutes? Marcus smiled despite himself. That is a long time. Do you know your mom's phone number? Another head shake. She has a phone, it's in her purse, but she took her purse. Okay, what about your dad? He's at work. He works at night too, like you. But he builds things, big things with cranes and stuff. Construction. Marcus nodded. He understood night shift workers, understood the pull between earning a living and being there for your family, the weight of providing versus the weight of presence. Tell you what, Timmy, how about we go find security? They can help us figure out where your mom is. Maybe she's looking for you too. The boy's face crumpled. I'm not supposed to move. She said don't move no matter what. And there it was, the heartbreak of childhood obedience. The terrible weight of doing exactly what you're told even when the world shifts around you. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He thought of his own daughter, Zoe, 13 now, and testing every boundary he'd ever set, but once upon a time just as trusting, just as vulnerable. Your mom sounds really smart, Marcus said, and you're being very good listening to her, but I think she would want you to be safe more than anything. How about this? What if I stay right here with you, and we call security to come to us? That way you don't have to move, but we can still get help. Timmy considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. After a long moment, he nodded. Marcus stood slowly and walked back to his cart where he kept his radio. Mall protocol required all maintenance staff to check in with security every hour. He'd been doing this long enough that he knew the voices, knew who was working which shift. Security, this is Marcus in the food court. I've got a situation that needs some attention. The radio crackled. Copy, Marcus. What's the nature of the situation? Lost child. Been here about an hour. Name's Timmy Chen, first grade. Mother went to restroom and hasn't returned. 10-4. Sending unit to food court now. Marcus walked back to the fountain where Timmy sat exactly as he'd left him, hands folded in his lap like he was posing for a school picture. Help's coming, Marcus said, settling down beside him on the fountain's edge. Not too close, he understood the careful distance required when dealing with someone else's child. While we wait, you want to tell me about those dinosaurs on your shirt? Timmy looked down at his t-shirt as if seeing it for the first time. This is a T-Rex, he said, pointing to the largest figure. And this is a Triceratops. And this one. He paused, his face scrunching again. I can't remember the name, but it has a really long neck, and it eats plants. Brontosaurus? Yeah, that one. For the first time since Marcus had noticed him, Timmy smiled. It transformed his whole face, made him look exactly like what he was, a little boy who loved dinosaurs and missed his mom. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the fountain's gentle bubbles rise to the surface. The mall's ambient noise seemed muted here, the distant hum of ventilation systems, the echo of footsteps from the far corridor, the soft ping of elevator doors. Do you have kids? Timmy asked suddenly. I do, a daughter. She's 13. That's almost grown up. Sometimes she thinks so. Is she nice? Marcus smiled. She's complicated, but yes, she's nice. She's very smart and very funny, and she worries about people. Kind of like you seem to. I'm not worried, Timmy said quickly. My mom is just taking a really long time. Before Marcus could respond, he heard the familiar squeak of security shoes against polished floor. Officer Janet Rodriguez rounded the corner, her radio clipped to her belt, her expression professionally concerned. Marcus had worked with Janet for 3 years now. She was good at her job, good with people. Hey, Timmy, she said, crouching down the same way Marcus had. I'm Officer Rodriguez. Marcus here tells me you're waiting for your mom? Timmy nodded, suddenly shy again in the presence of a uniform. Can you tell me what your mom looks like? She has black hair, and she's wearing a blue dress, and she has a purse with flowers on it. Janet made notes on a small pad. How about her name? Mommy. Timmy's face flushed. I mean, her real name is Susan Chen, but I call her Mommy. That's perfect. And do you remember what store you were at before you came to sit here? Timmy pointed toward the north corridor. The one with all the lady clothes. She was looking at dresses. She said she needed something nice for work. Marcus watched Janet process this information, watched her piece together the story. A single mother, shopping for work clothes after her shift ended, probably exhausted, tells her son to wait by the fountain while she uses the restroom. But something went wrong. Did she get sick? Have an emergency call? Get confused about which fountain in which mall? Timmy, Janet said gently, I'm going to make some calls and see if we can find your mom. In the meantime, Marcus is going to stay right here with you, okay? He's one of the good guys. Timmy looked at Marcus with new assessment, as if Janet's endorsement carried official weight. Okay. Janet stood and walked a few steps away, speaking quietly into her radio. Marcus caught fragments: missing adult female, possible medical emergency, check restrooms again, review security footage. While they waited, Marcus found himself really looking at Timmy. The careful way he sat, the patient set of his shoulders. This wasn't the first time he'd had to wait for adults to figure things out. There was something in his posture that spoke of practice, of a child who had learned early to be still, to be good, to not be a bother. Timmy, Marcus said quietly, can I ask you something? The boy nodded. Is it just you and your mom at home? Another nod. My dad lives in a different house now, but he still loves me. He just loves my mom from far away now. The simple poetry of a child's understanding of divorce. Marcus felt that tightening in his chest again, recognition of another single parent doing their best in a world that required you to be two people at once. Janet returned, her expression carefully neutral. Timmy, we're going to check a few more places for your mom, but I think we should call your dad just to let him know what's happening. Do you think you could help us with his phone number? Timmy's face crumpled again. I don't know it. It's in my mom's phone. That's okay, Janet said quickly. Do you know his name? His full name? David Chen. He works for Morrison Construction. Janet made another note. That's great. We can find him through his work. Marcus, can you stay with Timmy for a few more minutes while I make some calls? Marcus nodded. As Janet walked away again, he noticed Timmy's shoulders starting to shake. The careful composure was cracking. Hey, Marcus said softly. It's okay to be scared. I'm not scared, Timmy whispered, but his voice betrayed him. When my daughter was about your age, she got separated from me at a carnival. Only for maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like forever. You know what she told me afterward? Timmy shook his head. She said the worst part wasn't being lost. The worst part was thinking I might think she had done something wrong, that I might be mad at her for getting lost. Timmy's eyes filled with fresh tears. What if my mom thinks I left? What if she comes back and I'm not here? Then we'll find her and explain. But Timmy, I promise you your mom isn't going to be mad. When she sees you, she's just going to be happy you're safe. They sat in the strange quiet of the mostly empty mall. Two people from different generations bound together by circumstance, and the simple fact that sometimes being alone is too much to bear without someone sitting beside you. Marcus thought about his own daughter. Probably asleep at this hour, her homework spread across her desk like she'd fallen asleep reading. Zoe, who was growing up too fast, who rolled her eyes at his jokes but still let him drive her to school when her friends couldn't. Zoe, who was learning to navigate the world without her mother, just like he was learning to raise her alone. The radio crackled, and Janet's voice came through clearly. Medical emergency in the south parking lot. Female, mid-30s, possible cardiac episode. Paramedics en route. Marcus felt his stomach drop even as he kept his expression carefully calm. Timmy was looking at him with those wide, trusting eyes. Is that my mom? Timmy asked, because children are remarkably good at reading the spaces between words. We don't know yet, Marcus said honestly. But if it is, it sounds like she's getting help. Timmy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very small. Is she going to be okay? And there it was, the question that every child asks, and no adult can truly answer. The question that cuts through all the careful explanations and measured responses straight to the heart of what it means to love someone in an uncertain world. "I don't know," Marcus said. "But I know there are good people taking care of her. And I know that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. Because that's what people do, take care of each other." Timmy nodded, processing this with the gravity of someone much older. Then, in a gesture that nearly broke Marcus's heart, he scooted a little closer on the fountain's edge. They sat together in the fluorescent quiet, waiting for news that would change everything. The paramedics arrived like a controlled, storm-efficient motion and urgent calm. Marcus watched through the mall's glass doors as the ambulance lights painted red and blue streaks across the parking lot asphalt. Beside him, Timmy had gone very still, the kind of stillness that children achieve when they're trying to disappear into themselves. Janet returned 15 minutes later, her radio silent now, her face carefully composed in the way of people who deliver difficult news for a living. "Timmy," she said, settling down beside them on the fountain's edge, "we found your mom." The boy's head snapped up. "Is she okay?" "She's sick right now, but the doctors are going to take very good care of her. She's going to the hospital so they can help her feel better." "Can I see her?" "Soon. Your dad is on his way here right now. He's going to take you to see her." Timmy absorbed this information with the particular focus of a child trying to understand which pieces of his world were shifting. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, honey. You did everything exactly right. You stayed right where your mom told you to stay, and you were brave when you got scared." Marcus watched Janet handle this conversation with practiced gentleness, but he could see the details she wasn't sharing. The way her radio had gone quiet too quickly. The careful word choice. Sick instead of collapsed. Help her feel better instead of save her life. 23 years of night shifts had taught him to read the spaces between words. A man burst through the mall's main entrance, still wearing work boots and a construction vest over his jeans. Even from across the food court, Marcus could see the panic in his movements, the quick, scanning look of a parent in crisis mode. "Daddy!" Timmy launched himself off the fountain's edge and ran across the polished floor. David Chen caught his son and lifted him in one smooth motion, holding him tight against his chest. Marcus watched the man's face cycle through relief, fear, and something deeper, the particular anguish of a parent who realizes how quickly everything can change. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," David said into Timmy's hair. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay," Timmy said, his voice muffled against his father's shoulder. "Marcus stayed with me. He knows about dinosaurs." David looked over at Marcus, still holding his son, and something passed between them, the recognition of one single parent by another. The understanding of what it meant to build a life around someone else's needs, to measure every decision against the weight of responsibility. "Thank you," David said simply. Marcus stood, feeling the familiar protest in his back. "He's a good kid. Brave." "We need to get to the hospital," Janet said gently. "I can drive you, or—" "I have my truck," David said. He set Timmy down but kept one hand on his shoulder. "Buddy, we're going to go see Mom now, okay?" "Is she really going to be okay?" David's pause lasted a heartbeat too long. "The doctors are going to do everything they can." It was an honest answer, and Timmy seemed to understand its weight. He nodded solemnly, then turned back to Marcus. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "I work every night," Marcus said. "If you ever come back to the mall, you'll probably see me." "Okay." Timmy seemed satisfied with this. Then, in the way that children sometimes surprise adults with their capacity for empathy, "I hope your daughter isn't worried about you being at work so late." Marcus felt something catch in his throat. "She's used to it, but thank you for thinking about her." They left together, David carrying Timmy's backpack, Timmy holding tight to his father's hand. Marcus watched them disappear through the glass doors into the parking lot's harsh fluorescent landscape. Janet lingered for a moment. "That was good, what you did," Marcus shrugged. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said quietly. "They wouldn't. I've worked security for 8 years. Most people walk past." After she left, Marcus returned to his cart and his work. But the rhythm felt different now. The food court seemed larger, emptier. He found himself glancing toward the fountain every few minutes, half expecting to see a small figure sitting there. The rest of his shift passed in mechanical routine, wiping tables, emptying trash cans, mopping floors. But his mind kept circling back to the weight of Timmy's question. Is she really going to be okay? The question every child asks. The question no adult can truly answer. At 6 a.m., Marcus clocked out and walked to his car through the morning light. The parking lot was already beginning to fill with early shoppers and mall employees starting their day shifts. He sat in his Honda Civic for a moment before starting the engine, feeling the particular exhaustion that comes not from physical work, but from carrying someone else's fear. The drive home took him through neighborhoods that were just waking up, suburban streets lined with mailboxes and minivans, lives organized around school schedules and soccer practice. His own neighborhood was older, more worn. Apartments and small houses where people worked multiple jobs and counted every dollar. His apartment was on the second floor of a converted house, small but clean. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with appliances that had seen better decades. Zoe's backpack sat by the front door where she'd dropped it the night before, and her cereal bowl was still in the sink. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter in her careful teenage handwriting. Dad got a ride to school with Maya. Don't forget you have that parent thing tonight. Love you. The parent thing. Open house at the high school. He'd completely forgotten. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. Zoe had inherited her mother's memory for details, her ability to keep track of a dozen different commitments. She'd been the one to write important dates on the calendar since she was 10, the one to remind him about school events and doctor's appointments. He showered and fell into bed as the rest of the world started their day. But sleep came fitfully, interrupted by images of a small boy sitting alone by a fountain and the particular stillness of someone trying to disappear into themselves. He woke at 2 p.m. to his phone buzzing. A text from Zoe. How was work? Everything okay? You seemed weird this morning. Even half asleep, she worried about him. At 13, she'd already learned to read his moods, to notice when something had shifted in his usually steady rhythm. He texted back, work was fine. See you tonight. How was school? Boring. Maya's mom can drop me off at home after soccer. Love you. Marcus made coffee and sat at the small kitchen table, looking out the window at the afternoon light filtering through the neighbor's maple tree. In a few hours, he'd pick up Zoe and drive to the high school for open house. They'd walk through her classrooms and meet her teachers, and he'd try to project the confidence of a parent who had everything under control. But first, he found himself thinking about Susan Chen, lying in a hospital bed somewhere, about David, probably holding vigil beside her, about Timmy, trying to understand why the adults in his life suddenly looked so scared. His phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Marcus Williams? Yes. Mr. Williams, this is David Chen. From last night. At the mall. Marcus sat up straighter. How is she? How's your wife? Ex-wife. But she's stable. They think she had a heart attack. She's only 34. David's voice carried the particular bewilderment of someone confronting mortality too early. They said if you hadn't found Timmy when you did, if he'd been alone when she collapsed. The sentence hung unfinished between them. How's Timmy handling it? He's asking a lot of questions I don't know how to answer. About why people get sick. About whether I'm going to get sick too. David paused. He keeps talking about you, about how you knew about dinosaurs and how you said it was okay to be scared. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Look, David continued. I know this is probably weird, but Timmy wants to see you again. To say thank you properly, he says. Would you? Would it be okay if we came by the mall sometime? When you're working? Of course, but you don't need to thank me. Maybe not, but we want to. After they hung up, Marcus sat in the quiet of his apartment, coffee growing cold in his hands. 23 years of night shifts, and he'd never had anyone call to follow up on a moment of basic human decency. It made him think about all the other moments he'd witnessed, all the small kindnesses and casual cruelties that happened in the margins of people's lives. At 5:30, he drove to Zoe's school to pick her up after soccer practice. She emerged from the building with grass stains on her uniform and her hair escaping from its ponytail, laughing with her friend Maya about something that had happened at practice. In the car, she chattered about her day, the pop quiz in algebra, the drama in the lunchroom, the way Coach Martinez was making them run extra laps because someone forgot their cleats. Normal 13-year-old concerns, beautifully ordinary. "Dad," she said as they pulled into their driveway. "You're being quiet again. Just tired. Something happened at work, didn't it?" Marcus turned off the engine and looked at his daughter. At 13, she was caught between childhood and whatever came next, still young enough to need him, old enough to worry about him in return. Her face was serious now, the laughter from moments before replaced by concern. "A little boy got separated from his mom last night," he said finally. "She got sick, had to go to the hospital. Is she okay?" "I think so." "And the little boy?" "His dad came to get him." Zoe was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Were you scared when you found him?" The question surprised him. For him, yes. "Good. Good? That you were scared for him. That means you cared." They sat in the car for another moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. Through the windshield, Marcus could see Mrs. Patterson from next door watering her flowers, moving slowly with the careful deliberation of someone in their 70s. "Dad?" Zoe's voice was softer now. "Do you ever worry about me? Like, worry that something bad might happen?" The honest answer was, yes, constantly. In the way that all single parents worry about car accidents and bad decisions and the 1,000 different ways the world could hurt someone you love. But he also understood that she needed to feel safe enough to take risks, to make mistakes, to become whoever she was meant to be. "Sometimes," he said, "but mostly I trust you to be smart and careful. And I trust that there are good people in the world who would help you if you needed it. Like you helped that little boy. Like lots of people would help." They walked into the apartment together, and Zoe disappeared into her room to change clothes. Marcus could hear her moving around, getting ready for the evening ahead. In an hour, they'd drive to the high school for open house, and he'd meet her teachers and try to understand what her days looked like when he wasn't there to see them. But for now, he was content to sit in the kitchen and listen to the sounds of her life music playing softly, the creak of her desk chair, the murmur of her voice as she called Maya to discuss homework, the ordinary sounds of home, the daily miracle of someone choosing to trust you with their heart. His phone buzzed with another text. This one from Janet Rodriguez. "Thought you'd want to know Mrs. Chen is going to be fine. Full recovery expected. And that little boy of hers has been telling everyone at the hospital about the nice man at the mall who knows about dinosaurs." Marcus smiled and typed back, "Thanks for letting me know." Outside, the afternoon was giving way to evening. Soon he'd get ready for another night shift, another 8 hours of wiping tables and emptying trash and watching the late-night drama of human life unfold in the food court. But something had shifted. The work felt less invisible somehow, more connected to the larger web of care that held the world together. "Dad," Zoe called from her room, "we need to leave in 10 minutes. "I know. And you need to change your shirt." "I know." But he was smiling as he said it, grateful for a daughter who cared enough to manage his wardrobe, for a job that let him provide for her, for the strange turns that could make a routine night feel like something larger. 23 years of night shifts. And finally, one that mattered in a way he could measure. 3 days later, Marcus was refilling the soap dispensers in the food court restrooms when he heard Timmy's voice echoing off the tiles. "Daddy, this is where the bathrooms are. This is where Mommy was supposed to be." Marcus finished with the dispenser and walked out to find David and Timmy standing by the fountain. Timmy was wearing different close shakis and a polo shirt that looked suspiciously like something picked out for a special occasion. His hair was combed more carefully than it had been 3 nights ago. "Marcus." Timmy broke away from his father and ran over, stopping just short of a hug but bouncing slightly on his toes. "We came back." "I can see that." Marcus smiled. "How's your mom?" She's better. She has to stay in the hospital for a few more days, but the doctors said her heart is going to be okay. Dad says hearts are like cars, sometimes they need fixing, but once they're fixed, they work really good again. David approached, looking embarrassed. I hope you don't mind us showing up during your work. Timmy's been asking about you every day. I don't mind, Marcus gestured toward his cart. I was just finishing up the restrooms, not exactly exciting work. Can I see your cart? Timmy asked. I want to see all the cleaning stuff. For the next 10 minutes, Marcus found himself giving a guided tour of janitorial equipment to an extremely interested 6-year-old. Timmy wanted to know what every spray bottle was for, how the mop worked, why there were different colored rags for different jobs. You have to know a lot of stuff to do this job, Timmy observed seriously. I guess I never thought about it that way. Dad builds buildings, but you take care of places where people go. That's important too. David was watching this exchange with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Gratitude certainly, but something else. Something that looked like recognition. Timmy, David said quietly, why don't you tell Marcus what we talked about in the car? Timmy's face grew serious. We wanted to ask you something, but Dad says it might be weird and you can say no if you want. Okay? My mom is going to be in the hospital for my birthday. It's this Saturday. I'm going to be 7. Timmy held up 7 fingers, then looked at his hands and corrected it to 7 actual fingers. We were going to have a party at Chuck E. Cheese, but now we can't because Mom needs to rest. Marcus waited, sensing there was more. Dad says we could have a little party at our house instead, just me and him and maybe my grandma. But, Timmy looked down at his shoes. I was wondering if maybe you could come, if you're not working or anything. The invitation hung in the air between them. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, surprise, certainly, but also something warmer. When was the last time someone had invited him somewhere, not because they needed something from him, but simply because they wanted his company? I don't work weekends, Marcus said slowly. But are you sure? I mean, I'm just the person who sat with me when I was scared, Timmy interrupted. Just the person who knew about dinosaurs and said it was okay to cry. David cleared his throat. Look, I know it's unusual, but Timmy's been through a lot this week, and somehow you've become part of his story, part of how he makes sense of what happened. He paused. And honestly, I could use the company too. Single parenting it's hard sometimes. Marcus understood. He thought of all the birthday parties Zoe had attended over the years, all the times he dropped her off at celebrations in houses full of married couples and intact families. The way he'd always felt slightly outside the circle, welcomed but not quite belonging. I'd be honored, he said. But I have a 13-year-old daughter. Would it be okay if she came too? Timmy's eyes lit up. Yes, I've never met a teenager before. Not a real one. She's pretty real, Marcus said. Fair warning, she might not be as excited about dinosaurs as you are. That's okay. Dad says not everyone likes the same things. And that's what makes people interesting. They exchanged information, addresses, phone numbers, the mundane details that turned strangers into the beginning of something like friendship. As they were preparing to leave, Timmy tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Can I ask you something else? Sure. When you were little, did you ever get scared about grown-up things? Marcus crouched down to Timmy's level, recognizing the weight behind the question. What kind of grown-up things? Like, what if something bad happens, and there's no one to take care of you? The heart of every child's deepest fear, spoken with devastating simplicity. Marcus thought about how to answer honestly without adding to that fear. When I was about your age, my dad got really sick, he said. And I was scared about the same thing. But you know what I learned? Timmy shook his head. There are always people who care. Sometimes they're people you already know, like your dad and your grandma. Sometimes they're people you haven't met yet. But there are always people who will make sure you're okay. Like you did at the mall? Like lots of people would do. The world has more good people in it than bad ones. Timmy considered this gravely. My mom says that too. She says most people are good, you just have to look for the good part. Your mom sounds very smart. She is. She's the smartest person I know. Except maybe you, because you know about dinosaurs and cleaning and how to not be scared. As they walked away, Marcus heard Timmy chattering to his father about the party, about whether Marcus's daughter would want to see his dinosaur book, about whether they should have chocolate cake or vanilla. The simple excitement of a 7-year-old planning his birthday party. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of October day that reminded you winter was coming. Marcus spent the morning cleaning the apartment and trying to convince Zoe that attending a 6-year-old's birthday party wouldn't permanently damage her teenage reputation. "Dad, I don't know how to talk to little kids," she said, standing in front of her closet like she was preparing for a diplomatic mission. "You talk to them like people, just smaller people. What if he asks me about dinosaurs? I don't know anything about dinosaurs. Then you ask him to teach you. Trust me, he'll love that." Zoe emerged wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. At 13, she was caught between wanting to look grown up and not wanting to try too hard. The result was an effortless grace that still surprised Marcus sometimes when had his little girl started looking so much like the young woman she was becoming. They stopped at Target to buy a present, wandering the toy aisles, while Zoe offered commentary on the apparent complexity of children's entertainment. "Why do they need toys that make noise?" she asked, picking up a truck that advertised 17 different sound effects. "Aren't trucks already interesting enough? You used to love noisy toys." "That's impossible. I've always been sophisticated." They settled on a box set of dinosaur books and a simple wooden puzzle with a Tyrannosaurus Rex. As they stood in the checkout line, Zoe grew quiet. "Dad?" "Yeah? Are you nervous?" "A little. Are you?" "Yeah, but not bad nervous, just new nervous." Marcus understood. The nervous that came with stepping outside your usual world, with opening yourself to the possibility of caring about people you hadn't planned to care about. David and Timmy lived in a duplex on the east side of town, the kind of neighborhood where people worked steady jobs and took care of their small yards and knew their neighbors' names. The house was neat but lived in, with toys scattered on the front porch and a bicycle leaning against the garage. Timmy answered the door wearing a paper crown that was slightly too big for his head and a t-shirt that proclaimed "Birthday Boy" in glittery letters. "Marcus, Zoe." He remembered her name, which seemed to surprise and please her. "Come see my decorations." The living room had been transformed with streamers and balloons, and a hand-drawn banner that read "Happy 7th Birthday, Timmy" in careful block letters. David emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron and looking flustered. "Thank God you're here," he said. "I'm in charge of making a cake from a box, and I'm pretty sure I'm failing." "What's wrong with it?" Zoe asked, following him toward the kitchen. "It's supposed to be chocolate, but it looks more like brown soup." Marcus watched his daughter take charge, reading the instructions on the box and diagnosing the problem: too much liquid, not enough mixing time. Within minutes, she had David starting over while she explained the science of cake batter to Timmy, who listened with the reverence of someone learning sacred knowledge. "The eggs make it fluffy," she said, "and you have to mix it just enough, but not too much, or it gets tough. Like Play-Doh when you squish it too much?" Exactly like that. An hour later, they were sitting around a small table eating surprisingly good chocolate cake and watching Timmy open presents. He approached each gift with the methodical excitement of someone who understood that presents were special and shouldn't be rushed. The dinosaur books were a hit. So was the puzzle. But what made him happiest was a card Zoe had made that morning, a drawing of a T-Rex wearing a birthday hat with the words, "Hope your birthday is Dino-mite," written in her careful handwriting. "Did you draw this yourself?" Timmy asked, studying it with the seriousness of an art critic. "Yeah, I'm not very good at drawing, but..." "It's perfect," Timmy said firmly. "It's the best card ever." Later, while Timmy worked on his new puzzle and David cleaned up the kitchen, Marcus found himself on the back porch with Zoe, watching the rain tap against the windows. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Yeah? Different from what I expected. Timmy's really sweet. And David seems... I don't know." Sad but trying not to be sad. Marcus nodded. His wife is still in the hospital, and he's trying to figure out how to be everything Timmy needs. Like you did with me. The comment caught him off guard. I had help. Your mom was... Dad. Zoe's voice was gentle but firm. Mom died when I was 9. You've been doing this alone for 4 years. I know it's been hard. It was the first time she'd acknowledged it so directly, the weight he'd been carrying, the daily balance of work and worry and love. For a moment, he couldn't speak. You've done good, she said. In case no one's told you that lately. Through the window, they could see Timmy explaining something about the puzzle to David, his small hands moving animatedly as he described where each piece should go. The ordinary magic of a child sharing their enthusiasm with someone willing to listen. Zoe? Yeah? I'm proud of you, the way you helped with the cake, the way you're being with Timmy. You're kind. I learned from watching you. When they left that evening, Timmy hugged them both goodbye unself-consciously, the way children do when they've decided you belong in their circle of trust. David walked them to the car, carrying leftover cake wrapped in foil. This meant a lot, he said. More than you probably realize. It was our pleasure, Marcus said. Really. Would it be okay if we stayed in touch? Timmy's going to want to see you again, and honestly, I could use friends who understand what it's like to do this alone. I'd like that. As they drove home through the rain, Zoe was quiet beside him, looking out the window at the darkened streets. Dad? Do you think Timmy's mom is really going to be okay? I hope so. But you don't know for sure. No. Nobody knows for sure about anything. That's scary. Yeah, but it's also why what we do matters, the way we take care of each other. Zoe was quiet for another moment. Like you took care of Timmy at the mall. Like you took care of Timmy today. Like David takes care of him every day. Like you and I take care of each other. A web, she said thoughtfully. What? It's like a web, all the ways people take care of each other, and when something breaks in one place, the rest of the web holds it together until it can be fixed. Marcus smiled in the darkness. At 13, his daughter was already wiser than he'd been at twice her age. That night, after Zoe had gone to bed, Marcus sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and thought about the strange turns life could take. 3 weeks ago, he'd been just another night shift worker, invisible to most of the world. Now he had a place in a little boy's story, a connection to another father trying to build a life from love and determination. His phone buzzed with a text from David. Thank you again for today. Timmy fell asleep reading one of the dinosaur books. He says you and Zoe are his new best friends. Marcus typed back, she said the same thing about him. And it was true. Driving home, Zoe had asked if they could invite Timmy and David over for dinner sometime, if maybe they could go to the zoo when Timmy's mom got out of the hospital. Small kindnesses, rippling outward in ways you couldn't predict or measure. Marcus finished his coffee and checked the locks, then looked in on Zoe. She was asleep with a book open beside her, one hand flung over her face in the gesture she'd had since she was small. He adjusted her blanket and turned off her light, grateful for this moment, this day, this life that was harder and more beautiful than he'd ever imagined it could be. Tomorrow was Sunday, his day off. Maybe he'd take Zoe to the park, or they'd work on the jigsaw puzzle they'd started last month. Maybe David would call, and they'd make plans for next weekend. Small things, ordinary things. The daily work of building connection in a world that could feel impossibly large and lonely. But tonight, for the first time in longer than he could remember, that work felt less like something he was doing alone. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in November, 3 weeks after Timmy's birthday party. Marcus was sleeping off another night shift when his phone rang insistently on the nightstand. He almost ignored a telemarketer's, and robocalls were the usual morning interruptions, but something made him reach for it. Mr. Williams? This is Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. I hope I'm not calling too early. Marcus sat up, immediately alert. What can I do for you? We're working on a story about everyday heroes, and your name came up. A little boy named Timmy Chen and his father told us about how you helped them at the mall a few weeks ago. Would you be willing to talk with us? I don't think there's much of a story there. Mr. Williams, from what we understand, you stayed with a lost child for over an hour, helped coordinate with security, and went above and beyond your job duties to ensure his safety. During a time when his mother was having a medical emergency, Marcus rubbed his eyes. Anyone would have done the same thing. That's exactly what makes it news, sir. We'd like to do a brief interview, maybe get some footage of you at work. Nothing intrusive. Just a feel-good piece about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Marcus's first instinct was to say no. He'd spent 23 years being invisible, and he liked it that way. But something in the reporter's voice, a genuine warmth, made him pause. Can I think about it? Of course. Here's my number. But Mr. Williams? The boy's mother wanted me to tell you something. She said to say that you gave her son the gift of not being afraid. That's worth sharing. After they hung up, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed staring at his phone. Outside, the November morning was gray and cold, the kind of day that made you grateful for warm coffee and steady work. He called David. Marcus, good to hear from you. How are you? Good. Listen, I just got a call from a reporter about what happened at the mall. Oh, there was a pause. I hope that's okay. Susan wanted to do something to thank you, and when the reporter called asking about everyday heroes in the community, your name just came up. How is Susan? Better, much better. She's back home taking it easy. The doctors say her heart is strong now. It was some kind of weird reaction to a new medication, made her blood pressure spike. But she's off that medication now, and she's doing great. That's wonderful. Marcus, about the reporter thing, you don't have to do it if it makes you uncomfortable. We just thought, I don't know. People should know that there are still good people in the world. Marcus thought about Zoe, about how she'd react to seeing her father on the news, about his coworkers, who barely knew him beyond his reliable attendance and quiet competence, about 23 years of being part of the background of other people's lives. I'll think about it. That evening he picked up Zoe from soccer practice and told her about the call. She listened without interrupting, her face cycling through surprise, pride, and something that looked like concern. Are you going to do it? She asked as they pulled into their driveway. I don't know. What do you think? I think, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I think maybe it would be good for people to see what you're really like. How you take care of people. I just clean tables, Zoe. Dad. Her voice carried the particular exasperation of a teenager whose parent is being deliberately obtuse. You don't just clean tables. You notice things. You care about people. You helped that little boy when no one else even saw him. Other people would have, but they didn't. You did. That night, Marcus called Jennifer Martinez back and agreed to the interview. The camera crew arrived at the mall on Thursday evening, during his shift. Marcus had expected something intrusive, but it was just Jennifer and a single cameraman, both of them working to stay out of the way of the few evening shoppers. We'll keep it simple, Jennifer said, as they set up near the fountain. Just tell me about that night. What you saw, what you thought, what you did. Under the bright lights, Marcus felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the camera. But as he began to talk about Timmy, about the careful way he sat, about his dinosaur t-shirt, about the tears that caught the fluorescent light, the story came easier than he'd expected. What made you stop? Jennifer asked. What made you approach him, instead of just calling security? Marcus thought about it. He looked like he was trying to disappear, like he was making himself as small as possible so no one would notice he was scared. And I guess I know what that feels like. You have a daughter. I do. She's 13 now. But when she was younger, after her mother died, there were times when she had that same look, that careful stillness. And I remembered what it felt like to be that scared and trying not to show it. So you sat with him. I sat with him. The interview lasted 20 minutes, but most of it would be edited down to a few sound bites. They filmed some footage of Marcus working, wiping tables, emptying trash, the ordinary rhythm of his nights. Under the camera's gaze, the work looked different somehow, more purposeful. "One last question," Jennifer said as they prepared to leave. "What do you want people to take away from this story?" Marcus looked around the food court, at the fountain where Timmy had sat, at the tables where people gathered to share meals and conversation, at the space he'd spent 23 years keeping clean and safe. I guess I want them to know that paying attention matters. That noticing when someone needs help, even in small ways, that's part of what holds everything together." The story aired on Sunday evening, a 3-minute segment during the local news. Marcus and Zoe watched it together on their couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn and wincing every time Marcus appeared on screen. "You look good, Dad," Zoe said when it was over. Very dignified. "I look old. You look like someone people can trust." Marcus's phone started ringing almost immediately. His sister from Phoenix, calling to say she'd seen it online. A few coworkers, expressing surprise that quiet Marcus had made the news. Mrs. BDOP's Patterson from next door, knocking on the door to say she'd always known he was special. But the call that mattered came Tuesday morning from David. "Marcus, you need to see this." "See what?" "The news story. It's gone viral. It's been shared like 50,000 times on Facebook. There are comments from people all over the country talking about their own everyday heroes." Marcus didn't fully understand what viral meant in practical terms, but over the next few days, he began to get a sense. His phone rang constantly, reporters from other cities wanting to do follow-up stories, producers from talk shows, representatives from nonprofits focused on community engagement. It was overwhelming and strange, but also oddly touching. People wanted to share their own stories of small kindnesses, of moments when strangers had helped them through difficult times. The call that changed everything came on Thursday. "Mr. Williams, this is Sarah Chen from Congressman Bradley's office." No relation to David and Timmy Chen. I know that's confusing. Marcus had never heard of Congressman Bradley. "The congressman saw your story, and he'd like to speak with you about something. Would you be available for a phone call this afternoon?" "I guess. What's it about?" "He's working on some legislation related to community support programs, and he thinks your perspective might be valuable." An hour later, Marcus found himself on the phone with a United States congressman, a conversation that felt surreal and slightly impossible. "Mr. Williams, thank you for taking the time. I watched your story, and it got me thinking about something we're working on here in Washington." Congressman Bradley explained that he was part of a bipartisan effort to develop legislation supporting community-based programs, after-school care, senior services, job training initiatives. Programs that relied on people like Marcus, people who understood their communities from the ground up. "We're holding hearings next month," the congressman said. "Getting testimony from people who work directly with communities, who understand what actually makes a difference in people's lives. Would you consider coming to Washington to speak?" "I'm just a janitor," Marcus said automatically. "You're someone who spent an hour of your workday making sure a scared child felt safe. You're someone who understands that small actions can have big consequences. That's exactly the perspective we need." Marcus asked for time to think about it, but his mind was already spinning. Washington, D.C. Congressional hearings. The idea was so far outside his normal world that it felt like someone else's life. That evening, he sat Zoe down at the kitchen table. "They want me to go to Washington," he said. "To talk to Congress about community programs?" Zoe stared at him. "Congress? Like actual Congress?" "Apparently." "Dad, that's incredible. It's terrifying. It's both." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "What would you talk about?" "I don't know. How communities work, I guess. How people take care of each other." "You mean like how you took care of Timmy?" "I suppose." Zoe got up and paced around the small kitchen, her mind clearly working. "Dad, do you realize what this means? That I'd probably embarrass myself on national television? That your voice matters? That someone wants to hear what you think about how to make things better?" Marcus watched his daughter, saw the pride and excitement in her face, and felt something shift inside him. For 23 years, he'd been content to be invisible, to do his work quietly, and go home to his small life. But maybe there was more to it than that. Maybe the things he'd learned about paying attention, about small kindnesses, about the way communities held together, maybe those things were worth sharing. Would you be okay with me being gone for a few days? Dad, I'm 13. I think I can handle it. Besides, Maya's mom already said I could stay with them if you ever needed to travel. You think I should do it? I think you've spent your whole life taking care of people. Maybe it's time to let people know that's what you do. That night, Marcus called Congressman Bradley back and accepted the invitation. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Phone calls with staffers who helped him understand the legislative process. Background research on community support programs. Practice sessions where he tried to articulate what he knew in a way that might be useful to policymakers. Through it all, David and Timmy were constant sources of support. Timmy, in particular, was fascinated by the idea that Marcus was going to talk to the government. "Are you going to tell them about dinosaurs?" he asked during one visit. "Probably not, buddy." "You should. Dinosaurs are important too." 2 weeks before the trip, Susan Chen came to see him. It was the first time they'd met, and Marcus was struck by how young she looked and how much Timmy resembled her. She was still thin from her hospital stay, but her eyes were bright and alert. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said, "for what you did for Timmy, but also for what you're doing now." "I haven't done anything yet." "You're speaking up. You're using your voice to help people understand how communities work. That matters more than you know." She handed him a letter. "Timmy wrote this for you to take to Washington." That evening, Marcus opened the letter. It was written in careful first-grade handwriting, with a drawing of a dinosaur wearing a tie. "Dear Marcus, thank you for being nice to me when I was scared. My mom says you are going to talk to important people about how to help kids. Please tell them that sometimes kids get scared and need grown-ups to sit with them. Please tell them that being nice is very important. Also, please tell them about dinosaurs if you get a chance. Love, Timmy." Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in his wallet, where it would stay for the trip to Washington and long after. 3 days before he was scheduled to leave, Jennifer Martinez called again. "Marcus, I hope you don't mind, but we'd like to do a follow-up story about your trip to Washington. The original story has been picked up by national outlets, and people are really interested in this next chapter. I haven't even given the testimony yet." "I know. But the story itself, a janitor going from helping one child to speaking to Congress, it's resonating with people. It's giving them hope that their own small actions matter. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that much attention." "I understand. But Marcus, you've become a symbol of something people need right now, the idea that ordinary kindness can lead to extraordinary things." Marcus thought about Timmy's letter, about Zoe's pride, about all the people who had reached out to share their own stories of small kindnesses. "Okay," he said, "but I want Zoe there when you interview me. And I want to be clear, this isn't about me. It's about the idea that we all have a responsibility to pay attention to each other." Deal. The follow-up story aired 2 days before Marcus left for Washington. This time, he felt more comfortable on camera, more confident in his message. Zoe sat beside him during part of the interview, talking about what it meant to watch her father step into this larger role. "He's always been this person," she said to the camera. "He's always noticed when people needed help. Now other people get to see what I've always known, that he cares about making things better." As the segment ended, Marcus realized something had changed. He was no longer the invisible night shift worker, content to clean tables and go home. He had become someone with a platform, with a voice that people wanted to hear. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unexpected. But as he packed for Washington that night, carefully folding Timmy's letter into his best shirt pocket, he felt ready for whatever came next. The Capitol building was larger than Marcus had imagined, its dome rising against a gray December sky like something from a civics textbook made real. He stood on the steps for a moment, briefcase in hand, trying to absorb the weight of where he was and why he was there. The briefcase was new, purchased specifically for this trip. Inside were his prepared remarks, background materials on community support programs, and Timmy's letter, which he'd read 3 times on the plane from Michigan. Sarah Chenthy's staffer, not David's ex-wife, met him at the security checkpoint. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe Zoe's age in a few years, but she moved through the Capitol halls with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "Nervous?" she asked as they walked toward the hearing room. "Terrified." "Good. The best testimony usually comes from people who care enough to be scared." The hearing room was smaller than Marcus had pictured from watching C-SPAN, but still intimidating. Rows of seats faced a curved desk where members of Congress would sit, and at the center was a single table with a microphone. "You'll be the third witness," Sarah explained. "The first is Dr. Patricia Williams from Georgetown. She's an expert on social policy. The second is Mayor Rodriguez from San Antonio. Hayes implemented some of the programs we're discussing. Then you." "What exactly am I supposed to say?" "Just tell your story. Tell them what you've learned about how communities work. Be yourself. Be yourself." It sounded simple, but Marcus had spent 23 years being invisible. Being himself in front of Congress felt like learning a new language. Other witnesses began to arrive. Dr. Williams was a composed woman in her 50s who nodded politely at Marcus before reviewing her notes. Mayor Rodriguez was younger, energetic, the kind of person who probably gave good speeches. Marcus felt underdressed despite his new suit, undereducated despite the years of watching human nature play out in the food court. The committee members filed in, and Marcus recognized Congressman Bradley from the photos he'd looked up online. The chairman called the hearing to order, and Dr. Williams began her testimony. She was impressive, citing studies and statistics about the effectiveness of community-based programs. Her testimony was polished, professional, exactly what Marcus had expected from someone with her credentials. Mayor Rodriguez followed, talking about after-school programs and senior centers in San Antonio, about measurable outcomes and budget allocations. Also impressive. Also exactly what you'd expect from an elected official. Then it was Marcus's turn. He approached the microphone, adjusted his tie, and looked out at the faces watching him. Some curious, some politely attentive, some checking their phones. "Thank you for inviting me," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the room. "My name is Marcus Williams, and for the past 23 years, I've worked the night shift at Meridian Mall in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I clean tables and empty trash and mop floors. And I watch people." He paused, finding his rhythm. 3 months ago, I noticed a little boy sitting alone by the fountain in our food court. He was crying, but trying not to let anyone see. His mother had gone to the restroom and didn't come back. She'd had a heart attack in the parking lot. Marcus told the story simply, without embellishment. The boy's careful stillness. The decision to sit with him instead of just calling security. The way small actions had rippled outward into something larger. "I'm not here because I'm an expert on social policy," he continued. "I'm here because I've spent 2 decades watching what happens when people notice each other, and what happens when they don't." He talked about the late-night regulars at the mall, the elderly man who came to walk laps because his apartment was too quiet, the teenage mother who brought her baby to the food court because it was warm and safe and she couldn't afford daycare. The small dramas of human connection and isolation that played out every night in a suburban shopping mall. The programs you're discussing, after school care, senior services, job training, they matter because they create spaces where people can see each other. Where a kid like Timmy doesn't have to sit alone when something goes wrong. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out Timmy's letter. "Timmy Chen is 7 years old now. He wrote me a letter to bring here today." Marcus unfolded the paper, smiling at the dinosaur drawing. "He says to tell you that sometimes kids get scared and need grown-ups to sit with them. And that being nice is very important." A few committee members smiled at that. "He also says to tell you about dinosaurs if I get a chance. So, dinosaurs are important too." The room chuckled, and Marcus felt some of his nervousness ease. "I know you deal with big policy questions and budget numbers that I can't even comprehend. But I also know that every program you fund or don't fund comes down to moments like the one I had with Timmy. Moments when someone who's scared or lost or struggling gets to feel like they're not alone. Marcus looked directly at Congressman Bradley. You asked me what makes communities work. It's not complicated. It's people paying attention to each other. It's creating spaces where that attention can happen naturally. It's understanding that most problems start small, and most solutions do too. He folded Timmy's letter and put it back in his pocket. That little boy is doing great now, by the way. His mom recovered completely. His dad and I have become friends. My daughter babysits him sometimes. One moment of basic human decency, and now our lives are connected in ways I never could have predicted. Marcus paused, looking around the room. I think that's what you're really funding when you support these programs. Not just services, but connections. Not just assistance, but the chance for people to matter to each other. He sat back, his heart racing, unsure if he'd said what he meant to say. The questions that followed were gentler than he'd expected. Congressman Bradley asked about the challenges facing night shift workers. A representative from Oregon wanted to know more about the informal support networks he'd observed at the mall. A senator from Iowa asked about the role of physical spaces in building community. Marcus answered as honestly as he could, drawing on years of quiet observation. He talked about the custodian who knew which elderly mall walkers were struggling at home, about the food court workers who made sure the homeless man got a free meal on the coldest nights, about the invisible infrastructure of care that kept communities functioning. Mr. Williams, the chairman said as the hearing wound down, is there anything else you'd like the committee to know? Marcus thought for a moment. Just that it doesn't take much. Most of the time, helping someone just means noticing they need help. The programs you're considering, they're important because they make it easier for people to notice each other. They create the conditions where small kindnesses can happen. He paused, and those small kindnesses add up to everything. Afterward, several committee members approached Marcus personally. Congressman Bradley shook his hand and said the testimony had been exactly what they needed to hear. Dr. Williams complimented him on making the policy personal. Mayor Rodriguez asked for his contact information, saying San Antonio could use his perspective on community engagement, but the moment that stayed with Marcus came as he was leaving the building. A young woman stopped him in the hallway, one of the staffers who had been taking notes during the hearing. Mr. Williams, I just wanted to say thank you. My brother has autism, and he gets lost sometimes. Scared. What you said about people paying attention to each other, it matters more than you know. On the plane home, Marcus thought about the strange path that had led him here. 3 months ago he'd been invisible, content to do his work and go home to his small life. Now he'd testified before Congress, appeared on national television, become what people were calling an everyday hero. But sitting in seat 12B, watching clouds pass below, he realized that nothing fundamental had changed. He was still the same person who noticed when people needed help. Still the single father trying to raise a daughter with kindness and integrity. Still the night shift worker who understood that small actions could have big consequences. The only difference was that now other people were paying attention. His phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. How did it go? Did you tell them about dinosaurs? He typed back, I did, and they listened. Another text, this one from David. Timmy wants to know if you're famous now. Marcus smiled and looked out the window at the landscape passing below small towns and farms, highways connecting communities across the vast middle of the country. Millions of people living their lives, most of them invisible to the larger world, but essential to the smaller worlds they inhabited. He texted back, tell him I'm the same person I always was, just with a better story to tell. The plane touched down in Grand Rapids as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus collected his bag and walked through the terminal, past the restaurants and shops, past the small dramas of travel and reunion playing out around him. Zoe was waiting at baggage claim with a homemade sign that read, Welcome home, Congressman Dad, in glittery letters that looked suspiciously like Timmy's work. How was it? She asked as they walked to the car. Surreal, terrifying. Good, I think. Are you going to do more stuff like this? Marcus considered the question. Over the past week, He'd received invitations to speak at conferences, requests for interviews, opportunities to consult on community programs in other cities. Maybe. If it helps. It helps, Zoe said firmly. What you said up there, about people paying attention to each other, that's something people need to hear. They drove home through familiar streets, past the mall where Marcus would return to work tomorrow night, past the elementary school where Timmy was learning to read, past the high school where Zoe was discovering who she wanted to become. At home, Mrs. Patterson was waiting on the front porch with a casserole and congratulations. David called to say Susan wanted to cook dinner for them this weekend. Timmy had made another drawing, this one of Marcus talking to a room full of people with the Capitol dome in the background. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee, sorting through the mail that had accumulated while he was gone. Bills and catalogs and letters, dozens of letters from people who had seen the news coverage, who wanted to share their own stories of small kindnesses received and given. A teacher in Oregon who started a program pairing struggling students with community mentors after watching Marcus's testimony. A retired nurse in Florida who began volunteering at a homeless shelter. A teenager in Texas who helped an elderly neighbor with grocery shopping. Small actions rippling outward in ways that couldn't be measured or predicted. His phone rang. It was Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7. Marcus, I hope you don't mind me calling so late, but I wanted you to know the network wants to do a longer piece about your story, about what's happened since that night at the mall. I think I've had enough attention for a while. I understand, but Marcus, do you realize what you've started? People are calling it the Timmy effect, this wave of everyday people stepping up to help their communities. Marcus looked around his small kitchen, at the thank you cards taped to the refrigerator, at the photo of him and Zoe from her middle school graduation. This was still his real life, the quiet morning conversations with his daughter, the steady rhythm of work, the simple pleasure of home. I'll think about it, he said. After they hung up, Marcus walked to Zoe's room. She was asleep with a book open beside her, her homework spread across her desk. He adjusted her blanket and turned off her light, the same ritual he'd performed for years. Tomorrow he would go back to work, back to cleaning tables and emptying trash and watching people. But now he understood something he hadn't before. That witness mattered. That paying attention was its own form of service. That the small kindnesses he'd been offering for years weren't separate from the larger work of healing the world, they were the foundation of it. In his own room, Marcus hung up his suit and changed into comfortable clothes. He pulled Timmy's letter from his jacket pocket and read it once more before placing it carefully in his dresser drawer, next to a photo of Zoe as a little girl and the newspaper clipping from his first interview. Small mementos of a life that had grown larger without losing its essential shape. Outside, the night shift was beginning, security guards making their rounds, custodians starting their work, people caring for the spaces where others would gather tomorrow. An invisible army of attention, keeping the world clean and safe and ready for whatever small miracles the morning might bring. Marcus smiled and turned off the light, grateful for the darkness that made such quiet service possible, grateful for the light that sometimes revealed its worth. In the morning, he would call David and make plans for dinner. He would help Zoe with her algebra homework. He would return to the mall and continue the work that had always been his, watching over people, one small kindness at a time. But tonight, he simply rested in the knowledge that sometimes the most ordinary lives contained the most extraordinary possibilities, and that every act of attention was a vote for the kind of world he wanted to help create. The weight of small kindnesses, he thought as sleep found him, was exactly the weight the world needed.